So scroll view makes sure that all the contents are covered and can be put under a scroll. I would recommend, if you are creating a form which involves various lines of code, lines of fields or multiple fields if it comes, even though your content looks better in one of the emulator, I would recommend still you wrap it inside a scroll view, because Android phones having a lot of form factors. Uh, so in that case, it will be better to add some sort of scroller inside. If the user using a small screen phone, he can still would be able to see the additional content. Because if you hide, or where the user could not see these two buttons, which is very important to finish the registration, of course the application cannot be used at all. So the standard practice would be, if a user registration form comes which occupies a lot of space, I would recommend it wrap it everything inside a scroll view. So a scroll view, as we said, yeah, here it is. So scroll view is a wrapper for all your layout, but there is some sort of limitations also in the scroll view. Scroll view can only contain one single layout. It cannot contain more than one layout, or one view, or one layout. That's the max it can hold. It cannot hold more than one layout. This is pretty obvious one. For example, for a scroll view, the child node is this particular linear layout. It's a single component for scroll view. Or the linear layout in turn contains various things, but that doesn't matter. A scroll view contains one single child, which is of type linear layout. If you add one more, so for testing purpose, I put a text view here. This is actually will break your layout, because scroll view can only contain one single uh, layout or view inside. So this particular case, this thing won't work. So if you are using scroll view, make sure the scroll view contains one single layout. Okay, so otherwise it's fine. Now we need to go to register activity.java file, and then we'll have our all fields initialized. Then we will add a persistency, or we'll save them into preference manager. Okay, let me see. I have to edit text. I start with the local specifier. If required, I will think about making it global. And how many buttons I have? Sorry, not the button. Yeah, we have but 2 buttons and 3 radio buttons and 4 check boxes. So and we have 4 check boxes, I hope. Maximize it. When you initialize views or widgets in this case, make sure you pay attention to the IDs, not to get confused with the radio button checkbox on edit text. If you give a wrong IDs, probably things will show, may not show an error, uh, but eventually will break your code in one point of time if the exception is thrown. But your Android Studio somehow trying to help you to saying that this does not belong to a radio button. But if you are using Eclipse, such a suggestion won't come. Okay, and we have two buttons. Register. Did we change the ID also?
Register is for new user.
Let's see.
That is complete register.
Sorry. Activity register. Okay. I haven't. Okay, the text is cancelled, but the ID is cancelled in this case. The text is registered, but the ID. See, the text is having the reference complete register, but the ID I kept it as the register alone. I haven't modified, so that same can be used. Okay, so initialization being done now. Now event listener is needed because there are two buttons and radio button checkboxes. There are plenty. Okay, let's see for where these things would be needed. Maybe for a button. I'll implement here to make it simple. On click listener. Okay, and implement the method on click here. Okay. So we'll put a switch case in that case. Okay, how many buttons we have? Okay, that's fine. Register elsif. Okay, we have two buttons, so we have if blocks recognizing which button gets clicked. Okay, it looks like except these two buttons, everything would require a global spec. I'll do that a little later. Now let us plan our persistency layer so that we can go ahead and save the data. There are plenty of ways to do that. I'm going to keep a separate class. So some name, just a name, registration. So plain old Java object, it's going to be just a Java class. Okay. I'm going to keep the constructor. I hope you remember a constructor will have the same name of your class name, but it won't have a return type, but it is a function still. A constructor is an entry point for your class. Okay. Set user name. Sorry, void string get user. It's going to need a return type. Time being, keep it null. Okay. So this particular object I'm going to create for persistency specific, which is going to hold your registration data. So how many fields I have, that many setter getter methods I may need, but I'm not going to use any objects, but I'm slightly going to do in a different way. But I'll let you know how I can save the data. Set username mean any name which is coming, username, something like that. Preference manager, get default shared preferences, and it would need an instance of the context. I need a context now. So I'll get the context from the constructor. I'll do one thing. The shared preferences is an object where your saved data is going to be saved. This is one of API in Android SDK, which could write a simplified preference data in XML format somewhere in your application context itself. So I can save various primitive type data such as string, booleans, numbers like float, integers, double, whatever value. I can save it using preference manager or shared preference object. Another object which I'm going to need called editor is also part of shared preferences, but I'm going to name it as a ed. So two objects I have. This is a read-only object where I can read any existing data. This editor is I can edit something whatever there in the shared preferences or in the object. So I'm going to initialize them. Context and editor. It's the same like preference manager. Get default shared preference context edit. So final one is edit option. So two objects I have. Using these two objects, I'm going to save my content. So set mean saving the data. So edit, because I need to modify, so I'm going to need an instance of editor. Put string. I'm going to need a key and value. Key, I'm going to say, okay, it's constant needed, so we have a habit of keeping a constant public static final string. Instead of directly hard coding username like this, I'm just declaring it as a constant, and there I define, because I will have various benefit, because I can avoid a lot of spelling mistake. If at all sometime I may forget username, I may forget some letter that will give some sort of error. So declaring it as a constant helps us to keep the same object called n number of times. So in this case, the key is going to be username, the data which comes here as an argument, finally ed commit. So your username will be permanently saved. So whatever data you send it through this method will be saved, and the same can be retrieved using shared preference get string, same key. There may be something value wouldn't have been set, so default value we will keep it admin, but user, of course, once he click on registration, this will be override. For example, whatever the user enters will be modified. Okay, so similarly I'm going to need a couple of methods for password. Okay. So this is for writing, this is for reading. So each pair will do the specific job, one for read-only purpose, another one for editing purpose. So when I just call get username in, it will retrieve the username which is saved in the shared preference. Or if I call set username in, it will modify whatever username is there, it will update and save. So these two jobs these specific methods are going to do. Similarly, I'm going to need various constants. Uh, Gender is going to hold a single data, so fine, that is good. But there may be three different set of datas the gender is going to hold. So for that, static final uh, integer male if number 1 is there, mean it is female. If 2 is there, mean male. If 3 is there, mean transgender. So that I will also explain how I can save the integers in the preference. So just for our comfortability, I made it as the numbers because the preferences can also show save numbers. Okay. Similarly, I'm going to need uh, interest type. So interest is going to contain true or false. We'll save the booleans. Okay, so how we can save that? Interest is a key. Okay. I'll make in such a way instead of interest, 4 different data we'll make. So I'm going to make it as a boolean. Business. Okay, so that's also we'll make it string. We'll save the boolean values. Business education. Travel. So we created various constants which is going to be needed for various requirement. Let's see how I'm going to use them. Mm. Sorry. Gender default will keep it female. If no values have been selected, mean default value is female. Okay, so gender has been set. What else? Okay, these all going to take a boolean's value. So it's not all private, should be public specifiers because I'm going to need access to set get. Pardon? Which one? Huh? Which one? Void set business put boolean business count. Default value is all false. None of the interest area has been selected. The second argument for default values, so set travel. Because all can be selected, that's why I keep everything as individual elements, because the checkbox there could be one single or multiple could have been selected. That's why all the four has been separately saved as a true false, whereas for a gender it is going to be always one. So if a gender contains integer value 1 mean it is female, 2 means male, 3 means transgender, but default value is female, we have said, because as soon as we show the user the registration page, we could have one value by default selected, let the user modify based on its registration data. Similarly, there's a default username password we have already set to admin. Okay. If you really want to protect, you can put some sort of random data so that nobody knows if you want. I'll keep it admin to start with, not to get confused. Okay, that's fine. So this is a small class, a utility class for me, which is going to save the registration data with the help of setter getter functions. Looks like an encapsulation because the preference thing has been hidden, because the preference type has been kept private. So how I am saving, nobody knows, but actually I am saving in preference. The preference object has been set to private, encapsulated. These things are just a constant, so I can safely use because it is no way it can be modified. And through setter getter function, I am accessing them and saving them and retrieving them. Okay, so shared preference can be initialized using PreferenceManager class. There is a static method which requires a context as an argument. Similarly, if you want to modify the shared preference values, you need to have one more method to be called edit. So it will give you a write access. So edit put string mean you are putting a string and associating with the key. That value is getting saved by when you execute the line commit. Similarly, retrieving the same value, put the same key, so you'll get back whatever value is being saved in the preference.
Why don't we directly
How you will directly save?
string? Does it not directly take?
Only one string can be saved if you say. How you associate? I save a string mean how I will get it back. Similar to JavaScript, we had an object, there was a key. So why the key was there? It is a field. So in that field, these things have been associated. If you notice, it is saving in the similar format. See, this string resource file, every value has been associated with the respective keys. So I am calling them, retrieving this value. I am calling them, retrieving this. So similar setup it is going to create. So these are all the keys we are going to set. So whatever value would be dynamically written and saved somewhere in the uh, application path or somewhere else. So that will eventually gives us an option as if the data gets saved. We'll see them. Of course, anyway, we are going to test it. So this registration is a utility class. I have some setter getter functions. So these functions have been used to save the data in the preference manager and as well as retrieving the data. So I've written, so let me see how I can save it. I'm going back to register activity. I need to start the saving process. Okay. So as user click on register, I need to start the saving process, or I need to save the data to preferences, where if the user click on cancel, I can simply close the activity, just dismiss it. So using finish. Now I'm going to initialize the object. This context needed as an argument because our preference manager needed a context, so I'm supplying it through the constructor. Now registration set username. It means it will save the username. The username is going to be typed on the edit text. I am going to need it publicly accessed. Create a field mean it will create a public access specifier. Private specifier can be globally accessed. So edit text. Username. Get text. Make sure you typecast it to string. Similarly, registration set password. Of course, except the buttons, I'm going to need everything as a global one. So I'll do one thing. Only when requirement comes, I move them and create them as global variables. Even though it requires some sort of changes, I don't mind, but it helps me effectively keep the object utilization. Oh, now I get me. Let me write this guy. Okay, so I made everything global. Password, okay, text. Okay, so username, password saved, and I need to save the gender, registration. Okay, here I need to do some sort of additional thing. First, I need to check which one has got selected. So male is checked. If male is checked, I set gender to registration male. Else, so if female is checked, I put set gender I'm not calling 1 2 3 hard code. I mean, I'm not calling through hard coding. If you notice, the male will put 1 as 2, the female 2, but since I'm reusing them, I define them as a constant. From there I'm accessing, so make sure you do the similar way. So whatever else is present, whatever other choice is selected, I can assume that is for transgender. So this has been saved. Now the individual one, again there are plenty, but I can do registration set business. That is going to take a boolean value only, so business is checked. It will true or false, whatever, it will take automatically and have that saved. So registration set travel is checked. Set education. That's it. All data would get stored.
In case of gender, can we directly send one instead of writing registration.name?
Yeah, you can. You can.
That is the second one.
Which one?
Putting one is the second one.
No, I didn't get.
Like we would asking to put hard-coded value 1, 2, 3.
Hard coding is not the right approach. That's what I am trying from the beginning. You are doing systemized development, remember. So hard coding is, of course, you can do. Instead of mail, you put 1 or 2. Who minds? It will work. Because all it requires an integer number. It could be direct integer, whatever. But what if you mistakenly put some number? Chances are there. When you hard code, I don't know what kind of value. Tomorrow suddenly your manager will come and say add one more gender. I don't know. Then what you will do? So instead of modifying the code, I can simply introduce one object over there. So that's the reason I don't prefer hard coding. So I'm trying to give it everything through the references. So male, female, trans, you will have to do a lot of exercise, because a lot of exercise I'm going to write in this way only. So of course that's the purpose we are having a constant in place. Why? We may be wondering why we need a constant. Of course, for this kind of purpose. So in any way, suddenly your team decides to have a different convention. Uh, hey, male, whatever male has been selected should be selected as a female. Why not? You can simply go and do and modify the values. So whatever male will become female automatically. So some sort of flexibility, modularity we can get if you use this approach. So fine. So data at this point would get saved. So it's a perfect example of an encapsulation as well. So we are saving the data in the preferences. Now in main activity where we validate it, we are going to, so I'm going to use the registration initialize. I'm going to need a context. So assuming the value is already been saved, removing the hard coded value, get username. So whatever username password is there in the memory would get compared, and the same is acceptable, it will allow you to log in. By default it has been set to admin only so far, because the preference is what we have created. uh, the retrieving option get string asks for a default value, if at all any default value. The default value we have already set to admin, so the previous one will still work, but let's see. Okay. Going to, of course the admin will work, but let me check the default thing works or not. It works. Now I'm going to register as a new one. I'm going to change the username and password. So I type something as a password. I'm going to keep mail. I'm going to select a couple of things. I'm going to register. One thing we forgot. We should have finished it. As soon as the registration completed, we should have taken the user back to main screen. Anyway, never mind. I'll manually go back. So the username I gave Dave, and the password I gave as a password only. So let's see. First I'll check the default one. Still works. So something has gone wrong. Let's see. Is there any commit or anything I forgot? Preferences, username, string, password. Looks fine for me, but let's see. I'll register one more time. Still I haven't added finish IP. It's not saving. Let me see what is exactly going wrong. Register activity. I have a finish call here. Did not update. Very blunder. In fact, the button clicks are not listening. particular block was not even called at all. Now things will be called and will be saved. New user. Registering. Okay, so it's successfully closed, so it means the registration went well. Now if I put the old password, it will not allow me to enter new one. So the data has been saved already. Once the user logged in, I want you to add one more button. Retrieve the value from the memory and display in the same registration screen and give them option to edit it. So that's up to your job. Edit option you have to do, but same approach. Okay, then I'll show you where these things are getting saved. So if you really want to see, you can click the Android device monitor. All your application gets created. Make sure you select your emulator, just showing the left hand direction, and click on a folder called data, and one more time another folder, same data. Then you'll see all your installed applications packages. In that, your application package name, I don't know what's the name I gave. I gave ComTave CTS, something like that. So this should be here, simple login app. If you notice, there is one more folder created, shared preferences. In that, if you see, this is the file all your data have been written. If you want to see that, what is that, when you can pull it up. So there is an option to pull a file from a device and save it in your drive. So I'm going to save it in my desktop. Save it. So I think it's there in my first desktop. I'll open and show it to you. So I just opened them. If you notice, it has created some sort of resource file, and this has actually been created. Some sort of resource file. Its magnification always goes wrong. Some sort of resource file which has been created. If you notice, these are all keys, whatever you created, and the value whatever we are setting. So others is a boolean type, so true false status has been saved, and password, so business set to true false, something like that. So in that case, almost all your values, see, for gender only number has been saved. So while I retrieve, I will get back whether 2 mean female, 1 mean whatever. So in this case 2 mean male, so male has been selected. The password what I entered, username what I created here, so everything is there. So it will create a file system and keep everything and associate everything with a key value. So key value map, so that's why that resource name is a map. So the object being mapped with a key, and the value has been saved as a string environment. So now the values are getting saved. First thing, you have to reproduce this example, and similarly as my requirement, you need to add a button here, edit. So once user click on edit, he should be taken back to the same page, same activity, but this time the value should be pre-filled. Whatever selection he has done has been selected, So he can modify his selection, change the password, change the username, and he can update it. So update option you need to add additionally, and of course only after logging in the user can edit the detail. Okay, so here somewhere you can put the edit option or somewhere, so that you can add. Later I will put this option into menus, option menu, because occupying everything in the UI, putting everything as a button may not be a right choice. Then I'll introduce menu systems, so how I can organize the navigation in the specific links. Similarly, the navigation drawer like that also will introduce. So user swipe from the corner, he will get a sliding menu appearing, just similar what we did in our jQuery mobile as well. So everything we will bring it here also. But before that, you have to complete this hands-on. Make sure your data gets persisted in the preference manager. One of utility class we have used, which is encapsulating the preference manager object and save every data and associate everything with the key. And I've already retrieved a data for validating the login using similar way. So using that same way, you can retrieve all the saved values and you can give option to edit the registration data also. So it's pretty straightforward. So that's it, part of persistent storage or something to do with the preference manager. So make sure you complete this part up to this at least, then go ahead with adding the edit option. If you could complete today, then I can move on to additional UI navigation plus another workaround for the same. I mean, I'll introduce a SQLite. But before that, I want you to complete this and introduce an option to edit the registration data as well.